Hello, good evening. I call the February 15th, 2022 City Council Work Study Session to order. City Clerk Ben Lane, please conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor David Ortega,
Present.
Vice Mayor Tammy Caputi,
Here.
Council Members Tom Durham,
Here.
Betty Yannick,
Here.
Kathy Littlefield,
Here.
Linda Milhaven,
Here.
and Solange Whitehead.
Here.
City Manager Jim Thompson,
Here.
City Attorney Sherry Scott,
Here.
City Treasurer Sonia Andrews,
Here.
City Auditor Sharon Walker, and the clerk is present. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. We do have Scottsdale Police Officers Dustin Patrick and Anthony Wells, as well as firefighter David Gonzalez here if anyone requires assistance. You know, the work study session today is to provide a less formal setting for the mayor and council to discuss a specific topic with one another and the city staff and provide direction on the topic as posted. We are not voting formally, but we're able to give a consensus. And on this topic, at the beginning of the meeting, we provide public comment opportunity just to maximize our work study. We limit the discussion from the public to 5 speakers. They each give 3 minutes, and they can be online remotely or in person. Speaking of that, I do note that Councilwoman Yannick and Councilmember Woman Whitehead are remote, of course, attending today. So with that, I will open public comment, limited to 5 speakers. Please announce your name and address, and I would ask for the remote by telephone. Staff, would you connect?
Good evening, Mayor Ortega and members of the City Council. This is Shane Stone in the City Manager's office. We do have a remote public comment from Paul Simonson. Mr. Simonson, please press *6 on your device and begin your public comment.
All right. Hello and good evening, council members and Mayor Ortega. My name is Paul Simonson. For the record, I reside at 8628 East Wilshire Drive. I am the chairman for 321 Scottsdale. I proudly reside in South Scottsdale. Districts are important to me because the closest city council member lives approximately 7 miles north of me, and the majority lives 10 or more miles north. This leaves me feeling unrepresented, and I know many of my neighbors feel the same way. Scottsdale is long overdue for districts. One of the 10 largest cities in Arizona, of the 10 largest cities, only 3 do not have city council districts: Scottsdale, Chandler, and Gilbert. It is common for cities to transition to districts as they grow. Scottsdale is behind the curve in making the transition to districts. The time for districts is now. 321 Scottsdale is not what was put to a vote in 2004. We are proposing 3 districts with 2 overlapping 4-year terms. Everyone in Scottsdale will have an opportunity to elect 2 council members in districts that will be redrawn every 10 years after the census. This system will be more straightforward. The current system is not working for us. In 2020, city councilor races cost more than $200,000, most of which came from outside of Scottsdale. It's expensive to reach 250,000 people in any meaningful way. And unfortunately, even with so much spent, only 4,054 voters filled out their ballot completely in the city council vote. Hundreds of thousands of dollars spent campaigning, and most people did not know the candidates well enough to be able to select 3. This is a broken system. Districts will unite Scottsdale, not divide it. Let's be very clear. Having more direct representation will make for a more inclusive. Centralized power is rarely good for the average person. Districts will give more voice to those who are currently not being heard. Districts will improve relationships between Scottsdale residents and our city council. 321 Scottsdale will be a win-win for city council and residents alike. Please continue this conversation and give Scottsdale residents an opportunity to weigh in on a charter change. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you, Mr. Simonson. Mayor Ortega and members of the City Council, that concludes our remote public comment.
Thank you. We have 4 in person. I'll call forward Daniel Ishak and Alex McLaren.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Daniel Isaac, 13530 East Onyx Court. Over the past 2 weeks, I've read dozens of academic and opinion papers on at-large versus district-based councils. While there are some differences among the papers, they are often consistent on the pros and cons. There are 2 primary reasons cited for a district system. First, size and population makes it prohibitive for non-incumbents or lower fundraisers to win. While that may be historically true and still true for very large cities, it is not the case in Scottsdale. Direct mail, email, TV, and internet have diminished this argument as voters have ample opportunities to educate themselves if they so choose. We also have term limits. Moreover, in the last 2 elections, we've had incumbents who have lost and had winners among low fundraising candidates. By the way, in the Valley, despite what the last speaker said, the only somewhat similar cities with district councils are Glendale and Peoria. Phoenix and Mesa aren't comparable given their size. I'll take Scottsdale's success over the other cities any day. Second, the reason for districts is if an at-large approach fails to reflect significant but non-majority stakeholders. Historically, this has pertained to race, ethnicity, but it could also be socioeconomic indicator, family status, religion, etc. Scottsdale does not have large cohorts of unrepresented groups or those that are geographically isolated. Further, our current council reflects quite diverse views on development, preservation, sustainability, green space, business climate, etc. Our at-large council is not homogeneous. Thus, the 2 primary reasons to have a district-based system do not apply to Scottsdale. Equally as important are what the papers consistently warned about a district approach. First, less qualified candidates. Citizens of this city deserve the best candidate based on skills, vision, and commitment to the city. Geography is not a quality criteria. If the 3rd most popular candidate in a district is more qualified than the top vote getter in another, we have de facto diminished the quality of the city council. Second, districts lead to parochialism, failure to put the needs of the city first and greater influence or possible corruption from special interest groups. Major cities such as Chicago are poster children for this. Third, lack of consensus and progress. Without the ability to view things from a citywide perspective, district-based councils can fail to move cities forward due to fragmentation. Many district-based cities have seen this and have moved to fewer districts or chosen a hybrid approach with at-large and district members to ensure that half of the council sees their job at the city level rather than the local level. So we don't need to change to a system that is unnecessary for Scottsdale and risky, other than perhaps to further the mayor's quest to divide the council to get his way more often. A district-based council would allow him to argue that as the only citywide elected official on the dais, his opinions have more merit than others. Then his policies will turn a thriving, beautiful city into one of stagnation, aging infrastructure, higher taxes, and one that is no longer a top city for livability. If that's the case, then shame on the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex McLaren. And then John Farmelli.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the Council. Alex McLaren, 7624 East Osborne. This kind of feels like we've been through this before, deja vu all over. In 2004, the citizens of Scottsdale voted against districting. That was called, I think it was called the 6 for 6. It was proposed that there would be 6 districts and the mayor elected at large. I think you'll see in the presentation that staff gives, it was soundly defeated. No was 61%, yes was 39%, there was 30% participation in the vote. In my opinion, districts will divide the city even more. I think the quality of, as the previous speaker said, the quality of people who run for council should be spread over the entire city, and you should be representing the entire city, which I think you do. And there's different diverse interests on the council, which is good, and not everybody has the same opinion of everything. I often don't agree with Councilwoman Littlefield, but I respect her positions, and I don't think geography should decide where our council people come from. I think the bond elections we've had in the past years have been indications of division within the city, where the council has been unanimous in supporting the bond proposals. The bond issues have passed in 1989, 2000, and then the other ones which were held in 2013, 2010, 2015. The council was split on or divided on supporting the bond election, and those failed. 2019, the bond election passed because I think the council was united, and they showed that to the city that we were united in wanting to pass what is good for the city. I think by having a district system, you dilute your voting rights. It was interesting to read all of I read the pamphlets that were submitted in 2004, the for and against arguments. Some of them were very moving. There was one lady who said, how shall we appreciate you? But I think that is a good indication of where the voters in the city stand today. So I would urge you to not go down this path. Thank you.
Okay, John Farmelli, and then Paul Messenger.
Well, this brings back memories. Good memories, though. My name is John Farmelli, and I live in the area of Hayden Road and Osborne. And I strongly support the amendment to change the city charter to establish 3 districts. The north, south, and central districts is what I think the plan is currently. Considering the population increase over the years, plus the geography, it's just time. It's time to look at districts in this area. And I've been a strong supporter of having it, even when I worked for the city. I like the idea of 2 city councilmen in each district. I think that's a good way to do it, and to stagger their terms. And to me, it just makes sense to have representation who actually lives in this area. I mean, there's so many things that you could see here: code violations, traffic, construction, short-term rentals. They're all issues that if you don't live in that district, you don't see them on a day-to-day basis. And I believe that time has come to have them in there so you can observe what goes on. Bars and restaurants is another issue. I again would strongly recommend that this city council amend the charter to allow for these 3 districts. Thank you, Mayor. Any questions?
Thank you. We're bringing the microphone to Paul Messenger, former councilman and legislator.
Mr. Mayor, council members, As an old councilman, went on the council 51 years ago and came off 5 years later. I'd like to speak to a situation which I think needs gradual change. When Scottsdale was a mile square, and for many years afterwards, elected 6 councilmen, all of them always at a large. However, over these past 70 years, Scottsdale grew from a mile square to over 180 square miles and some 30 miles long. The problem way up in the north can easily be vastly different from the problems we have in the south, from Cave Creek area clear down to we're next to Tempe. Our city council should be elected based on population, representing often very different environments to the north, the very deep south, and in our middle. We should, after charter changes, elect 2 councilmen from Scottsdale's far north, 2 from Scottsdale councilmen from Scottsdale's far south, and the remaining 2 from the middle of our city. To do this requires a change in our city charter and its elected support by our citizens. Our citizens need to vote it in. Elements Paul Messenger, would like to see in the process would be for Scottsdale to be represented by 2 councilmen, from 3 approximately equal population areas. So each area covered easily understood the graphic areas, and that these charter changes should not affect the current Scottsdale Council people during their terms in office, and 1 term after should be available after their current term of office, running against the persons, all the persons running for the council, and running under a planned charter changes, running under planned council changes. Current city councilmen should not be ousted because they chose to update and improve the charter. We've had this situation for a few years, and we don't need to change it instantly to get the situation corrected. I would just like to present those thoughts, and I would like to have it something that the council works on and makes whatever change they need, or maybe no change at all. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman Legislator. So with that, we will now close public testimony. For the record, we have received numerous emails and even some written additional comments that are part of the record. Today, the topic of our work study is the districting process. The council asked for this so that we could consider the petitioner's petition in a form to be presented to the voters. Our presenter today, we have 2 presenters. One is council member, we have the clerk, Ben Lane, and we have the city assistant city manager, Brent Stockwell. So proceed with the presentation.
Mayor, I'd like to be recognized before the staff presentation.
Wait, excuse me?
I'd like to speak before the staff presentation. I've
I
indicated
couldn't
required.
tell that you want to speak before.
Yes, please.
I certainly go ahead.
Thank you. I am adamantly opposed to districts and have no interest in moving this conversation forward. So I would like to make a motion to direct staff to take no further action on this item.
I want to second that, and I also want to call the question, please.
You know, the purpose of a work study and this maneuvering by the 2 participants who did not want to discuss in a healthy discussion is not why we're here today. And attempting to cut off any discussion of all the preparation that's before the public is also kind of outrageous and uncalled for. I say that because the two participants are holding a seminar next week of the at-large system, and they're certainly free to do so. However, the discussion that's before the council and the public, why we're here today, is to move forward with the discussion. I will not allow that to just try to circumvent the whole process, which is why we have gone through all the trouble of providing this for discussion. I also see Councilwoman Whitehead. Do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I think we've had this discussion before about needing to allow everybody to be heard. And I think that the public should hear the presentation, and I would like to hear the presentation. So I think that it's, we spend a lot of time on the dais, and a few more minutes is worthwhile. Thank you.
I see a hand from the city attorney.
Mayor, thank you. I just want to point out that Rule 11.20 does state that a motion to call the question does not require a second and shall be voted on without debate. So the council can certainly cast their vote however they feel they should vote on the motion to call the question, but I do think that you need to proceed with the vote on that issue, just on calling the question.
Thank you. Then, based on that, let me clarify the vote as to void the presentation and not hear the presentation that has been prepared. A yes vote will void the reason for being here in the public forum. A no vote would be to decline the motion to void, and therefore we would proceed. Is that correct, City Attorney?
Mayor, my apologies. I don't think I was clear in my comment. So the first vote will just be regarding whether or not to call the question without further debate. If that passes, then the next vote will be the earlier motion to direct staff to take no further action and to conclude this item on that basis.
Okay. So the call to question was a request to not have any discussion, and to vote yes would mean to not have any discussion, and to vote no would be to have the public have a fair hearing. So please indicate your vote.
This is Councilwoman Yannick. I'm a no.
This is Councilwoman Whitehead. I'm a no.
Okay. So we will have a discussion on the motion, which therefore no meant that the call to question would allow discussion on the motion, and accordingly the purpose of the work study is to have a presentation, and I therefore believe that we could continue with the presentation. If you want another formal vote on that, one was to cut off the discussion, which failed. Therefore, the motion that's remaining is to cut off the presentation, and I will vote no because the presentation is why we're here. And any obstruction of that is a clear violation of where public trust brings dialogue to the forum. And If there's any other discussion of this, again, I vote no, so we can have clear discussion, and frankly, I believe the voters should decide and not be obstructed at this point, especially, 10 seconds into the meeting. So if there's any other question, I would call for the vote that would kill that effort to
Mayor?
correct.
I'm sorry. I guess I would like this is Councilwoman Whitehead, some clarification. I thought we had a vote to allow the presentation to continue, and then after, is that not correct?
Sure. There was a base motion to just by Ms. Milhaven, and it is still there. And then what happened is Ms. Caputi said, we shall have no discussion. So that was voted down, the question. I believe the motion is still there to just walk away from here without having any discussion, and that was Ms. Milhaven's motion. So I am voting against that so we can have the presentation as prepared. So just to clarify that, a no vote means we will have the presentation. Please register your vote.
This is Councilwoman Yannick. I'm a no.
This is Councilwoman Whitehead. I'm a no.
Thank you. Part of this presentation is factual, and it is part of a healthy discussion without prejudice, and I hope that we understand that the staff has prepared a pretty comprehensive look, and I will ask staff to continue with their presentation made to the public in an open forum.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Assistant City Manager Brent Stockwell, and City Clerk Ben Lane and I are here as requested on January 31st regarding the petition presented at that meeting. I'll provide some historical background and context, and then the City Clerk will talk through some details about the request. So here's a summary of the petition presented at the January 31st meeting. It is a proposal for placing a 3-district system with 2 members each on the ballot this fall. The petition specifically called for the 3 districts to be configured in areas that are roughly south, central, and north, with the 2 council members in each district serving staggered terms. This would be put in place over the next 4 years. For historical context, a districting petition was also presented to the council back in 2002. It was discussed at a work study session about a month later, and the council appointed a 14-member citizen committee to thoroughly study the issue and report back. That task force met between February and May 2003, holding 3 public hearings. They focused their study on 4 types of districting systems: a multi-member district system similar to those proposed by the January 31st petitioners, a 6-district single-member district system, and 2 blended or hybrid systems with both district and at-large members. The task force cited several benefits related to moving to a district system, including increasing local accountability, reducing costs to run for positions, encouraging more citizens to run for council, and increasing the efficiencies of representing citizens. In the 2003 task force report, a lot of information was provided, including a mirror image analysis illustrating several trade-offs with each system. For example, a district system would lessen the number of residents per council member, reduce the costs of running for offices, reduce the number of recall signatures required, but could increase the possibility of uncontested elections. In the end, the council voted to place the 6-district single-member proposal on the ballot, and it failed 61 to 39%. It failed in most precinct districts of the city, passing in only 6 of 32. All 6 of these were in southern Scottsdale, but even given that, Prop 100 failed in 7 of the 13 southern districts south of Indian Bend. In 2009, the districting issue was raised again, this time by the Charter Review Task Force appointed to look at the city charter overall. A multi-member district proposal was presented by a member, and the task force recommended that the council revisit the issue. This recommendation was presented by the task force chair to the council, but no action was taken by the council at that time. In addition, in April 2016, a motion was made to call for a public vote on a hybrid district proposal with 3 geographic districts and the mayor and 3 at-large seats, but that motion failed 2-5, along with an alternate motion to consider other options. And that leads us all up to the petition presented on January 31st. Before I turn it over to Ben, here is some additional research that we conducted in preparation for tonight's discussion. First, the national look. About 1/3 of all municipalities in the United States select some or all of their council members by district rather than at large. Council manager communities such as Scottsdale do so less frequently, and larger communities are more likely to have districts than smaller communities. As you can see at the chart at the right, the larger the community, the more likely it is to select members by district. And as you can see here, Scottsdale, throughout our 70-plus years, has grown over time and grew by more than 70,000 between 1990 and 2000, so it was not a surprise that the issue was discussed at that time. And of course, as you can see here, Scottsdale has grown by nearly 40,000 residents since that time period as well. So among the largest Arizona communities, those with over 100,000 in population, 6 have districts and 4, including Scottsdale, do not. All of those communities with districts have single-member districts. Phoenix has 8, the other 6, and Tucson's system is different still. Since 1929, they have nominated members by district in partisan primaries, but elected members at large. There is one smaller Arizona city with a multi-member system. Bisbee has 3 wards with 2 members each, and they've done that way since 1988. Looking nationally, there are 183 council manager cities between the population of about 100 and 300,000. 116 or 63% of them have districts, and 67 or 37% elect at large. Among these, with districts, there are 8 cities that have multi-member district systems, including 3, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Hillsboro, Oregon, and Newport News, Virginia, that use a 3-district system with 2 members each. In addition to size, community diversity also plays a role. In fact, a number of communities nationally have been required by the U.S. Department of Justice to convert from at-large to district systems to address minority representation issues, but there is flexibility to develop local systems to meet local distinctives and local needs. As noted by the 9th District Court of Appeals in their ruling involving Tucson's district system, the structure of municipal governments and methods for selecting municipal officials vary greatly across the country. Such diversity is a manifestation of our federal structure, which ideally, though not always, allows local policies more sensitive to the diverse needs of a heterogeneous society, permits innovation and experimentation, enables greater citizen involvement in democratic processes, and makes government more responsive by putting the states in competition for a mobile citizenry. So if there's no questions on my portion of the presentation, I'll turn it over to your city clerk, but I'm also happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. And if you are remote, please announce your name and any comment. So at this point, we will continue with the presentation from Clerk Ben Lane.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and members of the council, I'm City Clerk Ben Lane. With Brent having provided background information and historical context, I'm going to discuss components of the petitioner's request. So the petitioner seeks to have our council elections move from an at-large system to a 3-district system, with 2 council members representing each district. There are several components to the petition. The first component essentially talks about that there will be 3 districts of equal population, and the district shall be named North, Central, and South. Some core principles of a redistricting effort involving the drawing of district boundaries there are several core principles that drawing of district boundaries would need to follow. In addition to following federal laws like the Voting Rights Act and other state and local laws, the population of each district should be substantially equal to ensure that each person's vote holds the same weight. Additionally, the district should be compact and contiguous, following natural boundaries like mountains and artificial boundaries like canals or voting precincts. Gerrymandering, which is the manipulation of boundaries, should be avoided. Finally, communities of interest should be kept in the same district. The definition of communities of interest is very broad, but is essentially keeping like-minded groups together. Some examples of communities of interest include those that have an interest in assets such as a neighborhood, economic zone, a park or school, or groups with a similar race or ethnicity. We use the current county precinct map as a basis to develop a map to present to you all tonight. The boundaries that we drew were all drew based on the county precinct boundaries. One thing I want to note is that in the southern portion of the city, the districts are very compact, and the voting precincts are very compact, and that is because the population is so dense in these areas that to ensure that there's essentially one person, one vote, that these districts have to be drawn smaller than the northern portion of the city, where the population is much less dense, and also you have natural boundaries or natural elements like the preserve take up space as well. So this is a map we drew. I really want to emphasize this is purely for illustrative purposes. This wouldn't be a final map, and any type of final map would need council approval. And so in the southern portion of the city, the districts would have almost 80,000 residents and consists of 900,000 plus acres, or 9,000 plus acres. In the central portion of the city, the districts would have almost 79,000 residents and consist of almost 18,000 acres. And then in the northern portion of the city, there would be over 82,000 residents and over 91,000 acres. So the second component of the petition notes that each district will have 2 council members with staggered terms with district elections starting in 2024 or 2026. The citizen petition requests that the consideration of council districts be placed on the November 2022 ballot. If the item was referred and approved by voters, there are several steps that would need to take place before districts are fully implemented. It is recommended that a districting consultant be hired to assist with meetings with the council and staff to determine districting criteria, obtain public feedback, and create maps for council consideration. Many consultants have mapping programs that allow the public to create district maps. These mapping programs look to see if certain criteria are met, such as equal populations, and to ensure that the districts are compact and contiguous. A consultant is recommended to help with this process due to their expertise and impartiality. I checked with some other jurisdictions, and consultant costs, and again, this would be on initial implementation and then every 10 years for redistricting, but consultant costs for a jurisdiction of our size range from $70,000 to $100,000. The consultant would end up forwarding several maps for council consideration, and then the council would need to approve a final map. The new district map would need to be sent to Maricopa County for ballot creation purposes, and also to the Arizona Secretary of State's office. As you know, the city recently implemented the use of eQual, which is the state's online nomination petition gathering system, and the state would need that information to draw the district boundaries for equal use. Normally, our candidate packet is available a year before the election, so essentially for a 2024 election, our candidate packet would be available in September of 2023. And so the reason why I brought all this up is just because it's a relatively short time frame to have to implement all this for a 2024 election, which is why it's good that there's flexibility for either implementation in 2024 or 2026. I grouped the last 2 components of the charter revision because they relate to each other. As a point of clarification, we have an election coming up this August and November for 3 council seats. The individuals elected to serve terms starting in January of 2023 would not be affected by the districting proposal and would serve a 4-year term that would end in 2026. A helpful way to think of this citizen petition is that it may take up to 2 election cycles to fully implement. Because the petition indicates that open council seats shall be filled first, and that if there are 2 council seats filled in the same election, the candidate with the highest number of votes gets elected to a 4-year term, and the second place finisher gets elected to a 2-year term. Another component of the citizen petition asks that the city look at other charter amendments that would be needed to fully implement a council district system. The following is just a preliminary list of possible charter and code amendments. If this were to move forward, staff would work with the law department to identify a complete list of charter and code amendments. Article 2, Section 4 of the charter relates to candidate qualifications and may need to be amended to note that a candidate will need to live in their district, a council candidate will need to live in their district basically a year before the election and then during the entirety of their council member term. Article 2, Section 10 of the Charter relates to filling vacancies on the council. This may need to be amended to note that when filling basically a portion of a term, the council will need to consider that the candidates live in that district. And finally, Article 2, Section 18 relates to term limitations. And the word term is not defined in the charter. So the council would need to provide feedback on the definition of the term because, again, this petition says that certain individuals will get a 2-year term. So a decision needs to be made whether a 2-year term is considered a term or it's not. In other words, if a candidate was elected to a 2-year term and then served 2 4-year terms, they would be at 10 years, whereas for most of our council members, they serve 3 4-year terms. And then if a 2-year term is not considered a full term, then they could serve up to 14 years because they could serve a 2-year term and then 3 4-year terms. So we would need further clarification on that. Additionally, there'd be some code amendments that would be needed possibly needed as well. It would include establishing the districts in our code, having the council conduct redistricting every 10 years after the census is done, and including a legal description of the council districts in our code. There's another possible code amendment to consider as well. State law allows that when a council creates districts, that they can actually lower the number of signatures required to run for office. So in this case, we have a requirement right now that you need 1,000 signatures to run for council office. In this case, you could, the council by ordinance could lower that to as low as 250. So this is just a very preliminary referral and implementation timeline. We've gone over a lot of these things already. I'll just note a couple of things. If this was referred to the ballot, we would need to provide the final language to Maricopa County by late June. And also another important component of the implementation timeline is that in addition to the things I mentioned, the governor also has to sign any charter amendments, and we would have to wait for the governor to sign before we could implement council districts. So here are some possible options for council consideration in terms of providing direction to staff. Any feedback would be appreciated, and this concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present today.
I'm going to start with some references to the mapping that was shown. And the mapping that was shown indicates 3 areas, basically noted by population. And Indian Bend is a break point. And for illustration purposes, there is no council member elected south of Indian Bend at the present complexion of the council, except the mayor. And the mayor is at large, so I do live south of Indian Bend. When you look at this, you will also note that perhaps, and I don't know exact addresses, but 3 live in the north and 3 live in the central of the 6 composition that are in the charter. The charter says there will be 6 council members, so the number would not change with this adoption. I heard a comment from the public saying only the best and brightest will be selected, and that let it fall wherever it may. If this were a map of jurors in a court system, and 80,000 people in Area 1, 80,000 in 2, 80,000 in 3, and for 10 or 12 years, no jurors were selected in Area 1, it would not fly as a jury of your peers. So I actually take offense to that suggestion that there aren't enough bright people in Area 1 of 80,000 people, because the reference was made, let it just settle wherever it settles. So that is an important point to make. The second fact is that in my opinion, I like the 3-2. I've written that I like it. And when we look at this, I look at it as retaining the at-large system in each area. There are 2 representatives elected at large in that district. And that district consists, that each district is larger than the city of Flagstaff, okay? Each district area is 80,000 people, approximately. 3 times 8 is 240,000 population. So in my view, again, having smaller bites or for selection is an open system. The other concern that I have, and I will also ask you to turn to the results of the final elections, which was an insert called undervotes. Okay? So this is the result of the November 14th, November 16th, 2014, 2016, 2018, and 2020. If you will look at the total ballots cast, each person, there were 78,500 ballots submitted. Each person had 3 votes for council. In this case, the count actually, there was 2 up for election. There were 2 up for election, and so they had 2 votes. So 78,000 times 2 ended up being 156,000 votes. There were 2, and they got to vote twice. In the November, and there were 77,000 undervotes. I apologize, I will repeat this again. In 2014, there were 3 councilships open. There were 78,000 voters, and they could vote 235,000 times. They got 3 votes, 3 votes. However, the actual votes was only 156. If you look at the next line, it says undervotes. 78,000 did not vote for 3. They only voted for 2. They didn't exercise their full vote potential. Either they didn't know who a person was running, or they chose not to because somebody couldn't reach them. Now look at 2016. In that election, there was 128,000 ballots submitted. Possible votes for 3 council people was 385,000 votes, but the actual votes was 205. 178,000 votes were short. Either people could not relate to somebody in their area, they hadn't got the message of who they were, and you know what? That's, in my opinion, a failure of the at-large system. When you look at the next line, 2018, there was just under 119,000 votes. Again, they had 3. Now remember, in the runoff, there may have been eight council people running, and 2 got eliminated, and ended up being 6 available in the runoff. Once again, 357,000 votes, and actual votes was 220. They undervoted 135,000 votes. So it means that nobody exercised the third vote when you're looking at an at-large system where, gosh, you never had a clear winner. Because if you look further, it will tell you that the percentage of votes not cast, look at 2016, almost 50% of the people did not vote for 3. That is the biggest flaw in this system. And even this recent election, when we had 156,000 people voting, a potential of 470,000, only 317 voted. You divide that out, and 1/3 of the votes were ignored. Almost 152,000 people votes were not cast. That is not representative democracy. When you look at a district system, one of the things we want to encourage as a policymaker, I'm not looking at it for myself. I don't think the council people here should be looking for themselves, but those are topics that we have to approach here. So what's happening is, in an at-large, if you look at it as a district, there's 80,000 votes, and you don't have to try to fish for 180,000 among the whole population. You can know your neighborhood, you can know your businesses, you can know the issues. It doesn't mean that you're not going to vote on mountain issues, traffic, and everything else. The green belt, the downtown, they belong to everybody. One of the biggest problems of this at-large system is then the special interests come in and they divide us into growth, no growth. No, we have revitalization, we have blight, we have security, we have so many other issues, but the big money goes for, are you a grower or are you a non-grower? That's really not what the city's about. The city is much more complex, and who knows what the issues are among that area that can contribute to it. Right now, this illustrates that somebody's going to say, well, gee, I hope I'm going to cast a vote for somebody that lives 30 miles away, and they're going to understand my neighborhood. That's a reach. That's a reach. If you have an at-large system, you're voting every 2 years for someone in an area of 80,000. I mean, that's a good chunk of people to understand not only the global, because these overlap so many areas. The preserve doesn't belong to the north, it belongs to everybody. The green belt belongs to everybody. But what happens is the occupation or preoccupation becomes, well, are you accepting developer money because they're going to sling $250,000 at you because they've narrowed the issue down to that, when in fact, we care about maintenance of our pools, we care about security, we care about all these issues that need to be explored further. And as I said, in Area 1, no one's elected. So the question that we're having now, and I'm referring directly to what is available for information, back to the 3-2, when you have that, if you looked at this slide, it would say in District 1, you have, it actually is, say, we'll just say 50,000 votes. And there's 4 candidates running, and it ends in the runoff, in the primary, and there's 2 left. Those 2 run in a general, and it's either up or down. You either vote for Joe or Mary, and it's conclusive. You're not wasting votes, leaving votes out there that don't matter. We have to be responsible to see that. And then 2 years later, you may have Jeff and Susan running in your district, so you're voting every 2 years. Because it was mentioned, the straight six, the old one that was doomed to fail, that is irrelevant here, it's irrelevant, people would be voting every 4 years. By that time, you're either disinterested or you hardly know. This way, you're voting for one person at large in your district every 2 years. And that's the engagement that we want and the improvement that I see in the system. It would be illustrated as on that line, Joe won this time 51%, or Mary, and 2 years later, Sue won 51%. And you wouldn't have this dangling number out there. As much as 46% of the people didn't even use their 1.5 votes. That's a lot of votes. And that's why it's more meaningful to get us to where we're going. The other part of the presentation that I want to call forward is I think it was about the fourth slide, was the one of the objectives of the 2002 study. I was there. I was a councilman at the time when they started the discussion. And at that time, the distinct question was made. Will it lead to greater local accountability? Will it lessen the costs? Because remember, if you place in the primary, you got to raise money again, double the money to go in the general election. So there's a great barrier right there in terms of cost to the city. Now that's what everybody concluded. It's still true today. Lessen the intimidation for citizens to run for the council. Okay? Somebody's got a life, they've got a job, they've got whatever, and they're saying, oh my gosh, just to get in the door, I've got to raise $200,000 or $50,000 or run against somebody that's got $300,000. Have a good day. That's a major obstacle as it was in 2003, as 20 years later. Increase the efficiency in representing citizens. More time would be spent on representing one part of the community and less time in traveling from one side to the other. So when one person has to perhaps come out of an HOA and drive 25 miles to meet with another area town that doesn't have HOAs, or vice versa, there's a disconnect there. And right now, it could all end up landing that way. The other mapping, and again, they didn't show how it changed over the years, but 22 years ago, I was the only one elected south of Indian Bend. And the same thing is occurring today. So when you look at the entry point and the communications, and the fact that in a way we're sort of a jury up here, right? We're sort of a jury. We're able to allocate decisions and make policy. I don't think anybody should be excluded. I think it can get as fair as possible to meet the main goals that are the same then as today. North gets 2, Center gets 2, and South gets 2. Original Scottsdale is actually what I call it. What's more fair than that? No one's dominating. There aren't 6 in one area, which could happen. If we looked at, from the fairness standpoint, if all of the elected live south of Indian Bend, I would feel the same way. I would say, hey, there's something wrong. The at-large isn't working because it's too bottom-heavy. We don't want it to be bottom-heavy. We don't want it to be top-heavy either. We want it to be balanced so everyone can feel that they have a vote. That undervoting is the statistical, forget about the rhetoric of other cities and so forth. It's just so difficult to reach 180,000 voters. I mean, if you're running for mayor, that's what you're doing, right? But to attempt to represent the whole city as an individual is very difficult. Did anyone, I don't see, okay, excuse me, Councilman Durham, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Ortega. I voted for the work study because I thought everyone should get to have their say on this important issue, but I do not see the need for districts and would oppose further action on this issue. Although we have grown very much since our beginnings, it's still pretty easy to reach all portions of the city thanks to the 101. It's easy to get on the 101 and go south or north. And during my campaign, I spent large amounts of my time in the southern end of the city because I didn't know what was going on there as well. So I concentrated much of my attention on the southern end of the city because I wanted to learn what was going on there. And I think there's no issue that's more important to this council and no issue that we've spent more time on than the issue of short-term rentals, which is largely an issue which affects the southern end of the city. But I think the actions we've taken on the short-term rental task force shows that we're all devoted to all parts of the city. And the same, I think, was true on the recent action on the Greenbelt 88, although that was a development which largely affected the southern end of the city. At the recent open house on that issue, every member of the council and the mayor were there. So no one is neglecting any part of the city. I think the city is best served when we have 6 people trying to determine what is best for the city, and not 2 people out of 6 that are allocated to a particular district. Now, right now, we are answerable to everyone in the city, and I think that's the best way. I think we work best when all 6 of us are looking to do what is best overall for the city. Now, some of the proponents of the district system have said that even if we have districts, all council members will work to represent the best interests of the city. Now, if that's true, why have districts? If we're all there for the best interests of the city, and I think we would be under any system, I don't see why we need the districts if we're all working for what's best. And I understand the claim that the South feels underrepresented, but we do have a mayor from the South, and as I say, we have focused much of our time and energy on issues that arise in the southern end of the city, such as STRs and the Greenbelt. So I think we've shown that all 6 of us are capable of working to understand what the best interests of the city and that we don't ignore any part of the city. And several people have criticized the amount spent on campaigns, saying it takes up to $290,000 to run for city council. Well, I'm sitting here as evidence that you don't need $290,000. I think I spent about $50,000, so I didn't spend anywhere near $290,000. And so I don't see any advantages to this system, but I do see possible problems, and most importantly is the possibility of division between different parts of the city. And all you need to do is look at some of the newspaper commentary to see what happened if we start dividing the city into different sections. And I don't want to see our staff time diverted from bigger and more issues on this. The mayor makes an interesting point on the undercount, but that could still occur if you have districts. If you're in a district of 80,000 people, there's a good possibility you won't know either or both of the candidates, and so As occurs today, you might vote for one candidate in that district and not both. So I understand the issue, but not voting for somebody is also part of democracy. If you haven't made your case and you can't get all 3 votes, that's part of the system. So I'm opposed to any further consideration of districts. I don't see a public uprising on this. I think I've gotten about 4 or 5 emails, and most of them were opposed to the district system. I think I've gotten maybe 2 in support, and there were definitely more against than were in favor of it. So I don't see a reason to spend more time on this, and so I would make a motion to table this issue. Thank you.
Just so other people can speak, as a courtesy, are you okay with you're starting to cut off people from speaking?
No.
Okay, so don't table it yet, I would suggest.
Well, the motion hasn't.
I mean, we're trying to just arrive at some consensus.
Yeah, yes.
So there's no need for a motion in a work study, and we get your vibe, okay? So I see 2 other people that want to speak.
Well,
So-
that's fine. The motion hasn't passed, so we can certainly continue discussion until the motion passes.
I mean, I heard a motion, I didn't hear a second.
I'll second that motion.
Go ahead, Attorney.
Mayor,
yes.
thank you. So this is a work study, and it is agendized for direction to staff, and there can be a motion to direct staff, but it really, I would probably ask Councilmember Durham to clarify his motion to be direction to staff not to take any further action on the item.
Yes, that's what my intention was. And if that prohibits anybody else from speaking, I'm glad to withdraw my motion until everyone else has their chance to speak.
Thank you, and I think that would be good form, just to
Sure.
continue the purpose of the work study, again, more informal. And the next person is Councilwoman Yannick, and then Councilwoman Littlefield.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Councilwoman Yannick. And to me, the most important thing about Scottsdale is that everybody needs to feel like they are equally represented. And based on my time that I spent in the southern part of Scottsdale and more recent conversations, I feel that that part of the city believes they don't have proper representation. And historically, when you go back, I think that's kind of proven. And I like the comparison to a jury. If you have a jury, it is supposed to represent all the people, not just certain parts, even though it's geographical. So for me, I think this could be a unifying theme for the city, and that we're going to listen to every district. We're going to listen to their voices. There is equal representation for all of them. And my recommendation would be, and I believe it's on slide 30, direct staff to draft the proposed charter amendment and bring back for discussion and possible action. What do we have to lose by allowing people to vote on this issue? To see if they are happy with what we have now, or if the majority would prefer a district system. So I really want to hear from the people. The best way to hear from the people is to conduct an election. Let's do it simple, let's do it quick, and let's see where the votes are. Thank you.
Councilwoman Littlefield, and then Councilwoman Whitehead.
Thank you, Mayor. I spent a great deal of time trying to figure out what I was going to say tonight, so I'm glad I get a chance to talk. I am, after all, a woman, so that's important to me. I do not believe that creating districts is in the best interest of Scottsdale. 2,000 years ago, the Romans said it best and most succinctly, divide and conquer. They used this ploy and it worked like a charm over and over. Developers know this strategy. I'm a native of Scottsdale. I went to Scottsdale schools. I've lived in all parts of our city, north, south, and now central. In my 8 years on the council, I have worked hard to represent our gorgeous, beautiful city and to have citywide focus. Other cities throughout the state and the country have used districts, and it usually worked to the detriment of every city involved. In order to get projects passed in each district, council members have to barter. I'll vote for yours if you vote for mine. Council members openly come out and say this to each other because they found it is the only way that they can get their projects passed for their individual districts. After the vote last week on Greenbelt 88, I certainly understood and understand the frustrations that you have with us. In fact, I share them. But dividing Scottsdale piecemeal into smaller parts is not the answer. That fractures and divides us into competing factions, citizen against citizen, council member against council member, north against south. It starts to sound like a war. This is not how you build and maintain a beautiful city. As for South Scottsdale, this part of Scottsdale is my original home. I grew up here, I went to school here, rode my bike down to the Batches store so I could get a bone for my dog. Everywhere I've lived here, even after my marriage to Bob, we lived in South Scottsdale while he went to ASU. I would not be your council person if we were districted in this city, because I now live in the center part of town. I live near the airport where my husband works. One of the most consistent voices I have when I listen to South Scottsdale residents is, we want to be heard. As far as I'm concerned, you are heard by this council. We hear you all the time, and that's a good thing. I have come to this conclusion in South Scottsdale. Districting is not your answer, but I do have a possible answer for you. You have a strength here, better than the other two parts of town, which has never been utilized fully in Scottsdale. You already have the people here and the votes. Look at the map and look how South Scottsdale has to be skewed and reduced land-wise to make the divisions of the city even by population. You lose population to the other parts of town, to central Scottsdale. If we district Scottsdale, you will be giving up this huge advantage that you currently have in the total number of South Scottsdale votes and voters. The answer is activate. Become active in the city government. Get council members running for election. Get boards and commission members running for appointments, so that you have a strong stable of people who know Scottsdale, who know what we do, how we do it, and why we do it, and get them up here on the council. Question for you. There's a candidate running from South Scottsdale right now. Do you know who it is? There's your answer. Who's paying attention to the elections? Encourage folks to become active in Scottsdale politics, to learn how the city operates. That's the way we win in Scottsdale, because then we all end up with council members who are educated, knowledgeable, and responsive to you, the citizens. Finally, I concur with past Mayor Mary Manross. This is, after all, a nonpartisan election, a nonpartisan council. If Scottsdale had a district system in the early 90s, I believe we would have had a much more difficult time to get the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve, or at least all of it that we currently have, as a world-renowned area in Scottsdale that we have done as a citizenry. Under a district system, you would not be able to vote for all 7 representatives, which you do now. You would only have 2 votes. 1 every 2 years. 1 every 2 years. And the mayor every other election year. The other 4 majority, would not be answerable to you. That's a majority of the council that does not respond or is not accountable to South Scottsdale. And each council member would only have to listen and respond to the individuals of her district or his district. The rest of the votes would just be trades. And this is what has been happening in districted cities. I'll vote for your project if you vote for mine. That does not lead for better government. You should not be able to vote for those other people, not because, and you would not be able to vote for these other 4 people because you would not have a vote for the 4 councilmen in the other 2 districts. They would have it. You would have no control on what to say, what they say, or how they say it. It's a definite divide and conquer, and 4 votes is a majority. It's a majority for every single district in Scottsdale because all of you would be facing that same problem. Developers would love it. They'd eat this up. It would save them so much time, so much money, and so much effort. And they wouldn't have to pack open houses with their supporters to pretend they have support by the citizens. In fact, they wouldn't need open houses at all. They would barter for 1 more vote, and they'd get it, and there's their 4. I fully understand the frustration that many of you feel regarding the height and density of development in South Scottsdale. I share it. I wish I could have changed the vote at the last meeting to better reflect the desires of the majority of the residents in the area and in Scottsdale. But I have seen how districting works. It does not work well, and it would not be the answer. I believe it would be extremely detrimental to the future of the city of Scottsdale and to the future of South Scottsdale particularly if we go in that direction. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Whitehead.
So I've given this a lot of thought, like everybody else, and I've given a lot of thought of what does it mean to have a representative government. So the districts suggest that geography is that which makes a representative government, but I think having the ability to vote for every single council person is representative, and I also think that a person's residence doesn't define whether or not they are representing a person in another neighborhood. I think it's whether that person has demonstrated to the voters that they know, they understand the residents of Scottsdale, and they care about their constituents, and they have the skill and competency to represent the various Scottsdale residents. So I am concerned that geography does not equate to representation, and there's nothing more concerning to me and more undemocratic than having 4 people on the city council be able to affect your neighborhood and they're not accountable to you. So those are my concerns. However, and I don't see, I think Councilman Durham mentioned this, I don't see a groundswell of interest in this or a particular cause that's making me want to move forward with this, but I always welcome the voters. If, we had a pretty small petition, but if that movement grew, I'd be very supportive of having voters decide. But I want to talk also about how Scottsdale is a world-class city. And it's because our past leadership have had the ability to think really big thoughts. So none of those other cities, Glendale doesn't have a preserve, Peoria doesn't have a green belt. We have that which is required big thinking and a unified front by our leadership. And I think that's extremely valuable. I also do feel for the cause of cost, the issue of cost. And I think that the last 2 election cycles, I know, again, Councilman Durham mentioned this, those of us who chose to be very selective about who we accepted donations from, we won. and we won handily. And that was, so money is, and that's a huge credit, not to us, that's a huge credit to the voters who decided how they wanted to pick their candidates and elect their city council members. So it was not tied to money. Money is scary, I agree. The idea of lowering the number of signatures, no, I don't like that at all. There's nothing I think that's more important for elected officials than actually meeting as many constituents as possible. So I think the 1,000 signatures for the petition is an important test of whether you really should be elected to serve the city, because ultimately you will be making decisions for the entire city, whether or not you're elected in a district. And Lord knows, we don't want you making decisions without having that full understanding of the city. But also, I think one of the concerns out there is not enough people are running because of the cost. But I think the real, when I really dig down, the real issue is the pay. And that's something we're not going to fix today, but it does preclude young people who might have a busy life, a family, and a full-time job. So right now the pay is far from a living wage. So it's not the cost of running as much as it is the actual pay once you get elected. I'd love to fix the undervotes. That's a problem in our democracy as a whole. It's just that we have to figure out a way to engage our voters because we need to hear from them. But for right now, I will support the informal work study motion, but I encourage the citizens to keep talking. I just don't see a groundswell motion, a groundswell of desire right now, as we saw with many of the other initiatives that have passed by the voters. So that's where I'm at today.
Thank you. We have two, Councilmember Milhaven and then Councilmember Caputi.
Thank you, Mayor. So as I see it, there's really two questions on the table here. One is whether or not we proceed to discuss districts, and the other is whether or not we support districts and whether or not we have a public conversation about it. And I'd just like to speak a little bit about what our jobs are, in that I think there are times when we need to listen, and I think there are times when we need to have an informed opinion. And I think this is one of those times when I think as council members we have an informed opinion. If we think something is a bad idea, we need to say we think it's a bad idea and encourage folks to not move forward. Certainly, citizens have other avenues to pursue if they enthusiastically endorse the idea of districts, and if they feel that way, I certainly encourage them to take advantage of those. I agree with much of what my colleague said, to no surprise. I do, however, want to clarify on the issue of undervotes. It is a political strategy for candidates to tell their supporters, vote for one and only one. Last time I ran, folks said vote for two and only two, because that's a way to ensure that your favorite person gets on. Because if you have one person you definitely want on council, if you cast all three of your votes, you may be undermining your favorite person's ability to get elected, and the second vote, your second choice, might beat your first choice. Likewise, if you vote only two, you're ensuring the two people you like most are more likely to get in. So undervotes is not a sign of disengagement. It's actually a political strategy that some candidates encourage. I think we've all talked about money, but if money made a difference, we would have a different mayor. And then I was elected in an election the first time in 2010. So if we talk about folks being unrepresented and maybe changing the outcomes of elections. And I'm a bit of a numbers geek, right? And politicians want to know where did I perform and where did I not perform. So I have picked through every election since 2010, looked at who did what in each precinct and sort of did what I consider this north, middle, or south. And I will tell you that for the outcome of virtually every election since 2010 would not have been changed if you broke the city up into middle, top, middle, the end. So those of you who might disagree with my politics and might think that I'm termed out anyway, but you don't want somebody like me next time. Voters were pretty consistent north to south on whether they supported me or not, and it would not have made a difference. So I think, as I've already made clear, I'm certainly not supportive of districts. I'm not supportive of moving this forward. In my informed opinion, I think it's a bad idea. Thank you.
Well, the good thing about going last is that it doesn't leave me very much to say. My colleagues have done such a good job already, but a couple of things I just want to accentuate. The point that Councilwoman Milhaven just made, and I'm only going to accentuate it because the mayor made such a big deal about this. This is a very well-known political strategy to undervote. We all told our voters to do this very thing. Just vote for two, just vote for one. Everyone's aware of this. That's how you assure that you get elected. It's a very strategic move, and Democrats, Republicans, and everyone in between tell their voters this. We all know this. We all utilized that strategy, so to pretend you don't know what an undervote is seems incredibly naive to me. Something that hasn't been mentioned yet tonight, I'm going to try to keep my comments to things that haven't been mentioned. Just a little fact. The population of Scottsdale has actually only grown 10% in the last 10 years. We were the slowest growing city of any in the valley over the last 10 years, and last year we grew about 0.7%. So this idea of sort of an exploding population that needs more representatives, that's, the facts just don't bear that out. So yes, I am obviously opposed to this idea of gerrymandering our city, which is how I see this. I think it just creates controversy and division where none exists, as my colleagues have been saying, pitting neighbors against each other. We are not three Scottsdales. We are one Scottsdale, and I think it's the diversity of our city that makes it so rich. And Councilwoman Whitehead said it best. I don't even think that the divisions are geographical. I think this council is a perfect example of 7 people who don't really live that far apart from each other, but boy, do we have different opinions. And I think that's what makes it so rich. People get all of our 7 voices, not just 2 voices. So in terms of money, it's already been pointed out, there have been candidates that have run on very little money. The mayor likes to brag about that. So clearly it can't possibly have anything to do, it's not a direct link, how much money you raise. Although I do think being able to raise money and being able to gather signatures, as was mentioned, is a display of community support. I mean, if you can't go out into our community of 241,000 people and get 1,000 people to support your candidacy, maybe you shouldn't be running for council. So the other issue I think has to be looked at here is that the first speaker who spoke is running a PAC that's going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars pushing forward this issue and trying to get their candidate elected. So I just want to rhetorically ask, how is that less money being spent on elections? I mean, that is the definition of a special interest. So in conclusion, never have the residents of Scottsdale before decided to support this idea of dividing up our city, which it absolutely does do. And I don't believe this council should either. Thank you.
Well, I think we have a consensus and opinion. I will close with my opinion on this. In many ways, this council and last year enacted things which were inclusive. The anti-discrimination ordinance said, we should have a fair playing field, and that was a good thing. And the barriers for employment, the barriers for any job, whether it's council or mayor or whatever, should be looked at. And I feel this is another opening for a removal of some barriers, because in particular this southern area seems to be put upon. It will have another 20,000 people if they build the rest of the apartments that have been approved. It will be a decision made remotely from where people actually reside as council members, and that's human nature. When you're close to something, it's tougher to make that decision, but when it's more remote, it seems to be made onto an area that's factual. It's very compressed, and that density is going to cause that struggle to continue. It's not really about growth. It's about all the other issues: public safety, blight, infill. These are on-the-ground issues that I think we live through, and that's how we improve things. There's no need for a motion in this discussion. I think you have the direction. I see Councilmember Durham did you have something to say, or?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify, I don't think districting is necessarily a bad idea. I think there are some advantages to it that have been mentioned, but I don't think it's a necessary idea at this point, because I see the possibility of some unintended consequences. Whenever you make a drastic change like this, things will come down the road that you didn't really expect. So I would be interested in hearing more from the citizens. If there's any interest in this, as I think Councilmember Littlefield mentioned, there certainly are alternatives for bringing this idea forward if people thought it was appropriate. But certainly at this time, I'd like to renew my motion that we, at the council, direct the staff to take no further action on this at this point in time.
Second?
Okay. Any other discussion? And those remote can say verbal or not, so.
Councilwoman Yannick, no.
No.
Yes.
Okay, you see it 5-2, and we are concluded with the work study and discussion. Much appreciated. For the information, the council will resume an executive session following this adjournment. So, a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Second, and unanimous. Thank you.